Welcome to this week's rant entitled, What Do We Really Know About the LMDrum? This is the new Behringer machine that was announced a couple of weeks ago and has got loads of people searching the internet for it. But what do we really know about this particular machine? The first thing we do know is it's called the LMDrum at the moment, as opposed to the LINNDrum, which is clearly the machine it is modelled on. And I suspect the reason that Behringer have done that is because there is some sort of copyright claim over the original LINNDrum name, filed probably by Roger Linn when he developed it, or recently a number of manufacturers have been filing copyrights over names of legacy machines. Again, I suspect because I think Behringer might be looking to use the name of their machine in a future product. Anyway, a few weeks back, Behringer did flash pictures of the pre-production model up on screen. They should be appearing up here or up here, depending on how the framing works. And bear in mind, this is still pre-production, but the fact that they have moulded the case, the litho's been printed, they've got most of the knobs in place, if not the faders, because the faders are definitely missing. Which means it's a fair way down the R&D process, research and development, for those of you who don't understand R&D. But what else do we actually know? So it's this point I feel I should do the channel promotion. Feel free to whiz past this, but it is important. If you like the content of this type of video and you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe icon. If you want to be notified, it's the bell icon as well. Save yourself some time, 2 for 1, hit both together. If you like the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up and please leave comments below the video, because it's really interesting to see what other people's views are on subjects. I do read them, I do respond to them, and sometimes you even give me the ideas for making new videos. Also down there are the Facebook and Instagram feeds. That's where the normal channel shenanigans are posted, as well as these videos when they arrive. Go over there and tag me or follow me on those two areas and you'll be notified when things happen. And finally, for less than the price of a cup of coffee, also down there is the address of the TMTG community. Go over there, sponsor the channel, and keep the channel rocking and rolling into the future. But now back to this particular video. Yes, I'm back in the workshop. I have had a monumental clear out of the workshop in the last couple of weeks. There's been loads of stuff with partially completed projects that I've kind of cleared away to one side. In fact, a number of them are just off camera over here. But I needed to get some room, I needed to get some order back in here, so that's exactly what I've done. What you will notice is sitting over here, probably just off shot, it might just be in shot, is my Yamaha SY77. I haven't really done an awful lot with this keyboard, but I do think I probably need to try retrobrighten the keys on the keyboard because they're going quite yellow. And at the moment I've got in this machine, I've been playing around today with this, which is the Rock and Pop set, which is a series of 2 cards. The Yamaha cards for this keyboard came in 2 flavours. You ended up with a data card and a waveform card. It's pretty obvious what each one does, but it gives you a whole raft of new tones for the SY77. Anyway, you're not watching this because of the SY77. You're watching this because we're talking about the Behringer LMDrum. Now, back in November, Behringer put up a screenshot of a computer-aided representation, or what we know as a CAD drawing, of a new instrument on their Facebook feed. Now, I remember seeing this CAD representation, and at the time it didn't register with me that it was the LINNDrum, which is why I said the other day when I was talking about this particular machine that I was hoping for a DMX, not the LMDrum, where I'd actually posted the picture of the circuit board for the LINNDrum. So you know, that's the way it goes. It didn't click with me, so I was sort of keeping my fingers crossed for something else. And someone did say, well, if it's going to be a sampling drum machine, it can be a DMX. Yeah, but kind of what you want is you want the machine as it was produced by Oberheim, not a sampling machine that you can recreate a DMX. And there is a reason for that, which I will cover off in another video, because I'm not going to get into the whole sampling thing in this video. But I think it's at this point I should make a couple of corrections, because in my previous video I made the statement that this was the Linn Mark II. Of course, I was referring to the fact it was the Linn LM2. However, neither are actually correct. There is no such thing as a Mark II, and there's no such thing as an LM2, although a lot of people refer to the second machine produced by Linn as the LM2. In actual fact, the LINNDrum, or the first machine produced by Linn, the first Linn drum machine, was called the LM1, and it was actually called the drum computer. And if you look this up on the internet, what you'll find is a sort of a boxy machine with a wedge at the front of it. And that panel on the front, that wedge, is where all the user controls are. So effectively the panel looks like that. And that's where all the buttons were for programming the drum computer, which is actually quite similar to what Roland, and I don't think Yamaha did it, but Roland definitely did it, in their early drum machines were called computermatic, something like that. But they were referencing the computer element of the drum machine. Anyway, the first Linn drum machine, the LM1, was actually released in 1980. And a number of popular artists from 1980 to say 1983, 84 used that particular machine on the pop tracks that were being issued. The machine that Behringer is actually working on is the second machine that was issued by the Linn organisation, which many, including me, mistakenly do call the LM2. In fact, as I said, neither is correct. The instrument is actually the LINNDrum, which is the term many applied to both drum machines that were produced. So you can see where the confusion has come, and where even though I did know this, when somebody was talking to me, and when I was talking to camera, I just said LM2, and somebody got on the channel and said, "For God's sake, man, there's no such thing as the LM2." And you're absolutely, completely correct. There is no such thing as the LM2. But if I said the LINNDrum LM2 to you, everybody would know what I was talking about. Isn't that weird? It never exists as a model number, but everybody knows the second machine as the LM2. Anyway, I hope this clears up this subtle mistake. I started filming this in the garden earlier on and scrapped all that footage because, well, just because. So I've moved into the workshop, which is a good job. I cleared it out really, wasn't it? Okay, back to the CAD picture published in November. If the machine was truly at a 3D design stage at this point, they have quickly got from effectively what we used to call the on-paper design to a pre-production prototype, which is brilliant news. I mean, if they can move that quickly, we're going to see a lot more instruments from Behringer in the next few years, based on the teasing that they are starting to push out into the market space. Anyway, you can clearly see from the CAD design, this is the same machine that they posted the pre-production images for the other day. So we've got from effectively CAD to pre-production. Really, really good news. Anyway, this is where we have to start reading a little bit between the lines. This part is called ARM technology. Behringer has stated a number of times that they can now accelerate the production of new instruments, both reimagined and new instruments, because of the ARM technology that they have developed. Now, For many people, this is probably going to have gone over their head. But actually, what they're referring to is a chip technology, which is from a manufacturer called ARM. So ARM is a chip manufacturer, and believe it or not, most mobile devices, so your mobile phone, your tablet, probably contain an ARM RISC processor in them. So the ARM chipsets are fairly well embedded in our daily lives, although we probably don't realise it. Now, here's a fact that may be interesting to some of you, may not be interesting to many of you. But when I grew up, we used a bunch of computers in schools. Okay, now the fact is that ARM, ARM, originally stood for Acorn RISC Machine, and Acorn, of course, was a company behind the Acorn Electron, the BBC Model B, the Acorn Archimedes, and a number of other 8/16-bit machines that were produced in the early, mid, late 80s. And these microcomputers were used by most schools in the UK. If you talk to somebody my age in the UK and you say the BBC Model B, they will probably know what you're talking about, because if you were doing any sort of computer work in the, say, that sort of early to mid to late 80s in schools, you typically probably would have been on a BBC Model B, or you would have been on an Acorn Archimedes. It was a program that was sponsored by the UK government, and therefore a lot of schools bought into these models. The early Winchester hard drives, I can remember the size of these being sort of like the size of a desk. I think it was called Econet, if I remember correctly, was the networking technology. Anyway, as a side, ARM now stands for Advanced RISC Machine. And the company is still headquartered in Cambridge, which is where both Sinclair and Acorn were headquartered. And again, another quick fact here that most people don't know, that the guy who formed Acorn, or one of the guys that formed Acorn, used to work for Clive Sinclair, and effectively he walked across the road. It wasn't that simple, but there's a great documentary on Netflix, I think you can find it, called The Micro Men, which tells the story of Sinclair and Acorn fighting for business. Anyway, they're based in Cambridge, and they make 64-bit chips that power our mobile world effectively. The chip itself, or the chipsets, they come in various different sizes to suit various different applications. And when I say sizes, I'm not talking about the actual size of the chip, I'm talking about its capability in terms of things like computations per second, power usage and such like. The information that Behringer's kind of drip feeded out to us suggests that they have used one of these ARM chipsets to build a system that allows them to emulate classic synthesizers. Much in the way that Roland did with ACB. But unlike Roland, who have all but admitted that ACB technology is not powerful enough to recreate the bigger and more powerful synths that Roland had in sort of the late 70s, early 80s area, and maybe trying to pinch other people's ideas like Behringer have done. And I don't mean that in the wrong way. Behringer have not pinched other people's ideas. What they've done is listen to the market space. And this technology seems to be, or the technology that Behringer have developed seems to be far more scalable in terms of how it can work and what it can actually do. And I suspect, the way that they've been talking, this is the technology that sits behind the UBXA, which I'm definitely waiting to hit the market, and possibly this new LINNDrum, or LMDrum, should I say, that is just about to hit the market, the teasers that we've had. Now, somebody commented on the channel the other day that ARM and ACB technologies are different. And yes, I completely agree with you. The core technology between these two systems is different. The waveforms are generated, even though they're different, the core outcome is still the same. The waveforms are generated from scratch within the instrument. The hardware gives the user the ability to generate the characteristics as if they were using the original instrument, and therefore they can manipulate the way the wave is generated. And really, for the record, and before somebody screams at me, Zencore starts with a PCM sample for a lot of this legacy tech and allows you to manipulate the wave once it's been generated. Whereas the whole ACB and ARM scenario is it generates the wave. That's kind of the key difference here. But what Behringer seemed to have done is come up with a much more scalable solution than Roland did, which is why Roland are busily trying to move away from ACB to the Zencore technologies, because that's the way they can scale it. They couldn't scale ACB in the same way. Okay, so this is the bit where we get on to what do we actually know about the machine itself. At this point, Behringer are keeping the machine itself very close to their chest, if that makes any sense. The unit was muted about 2 years ago, so there was a sort of market push to see if there was interest about 2 years ago. Behringer have told us in a couple of posts recently that it takes about a year from the point they decide they're going to go for something to the point where they can actually map the internal circuitry of the target instrument. And that was borne out really recently with the DS80 announcement that it had taken them a year. Now that's more complex, so other instruments may take them less than a year, but they've stated it's about a year. They've teased us with circuit design about 9 months ago, so the 3D CAD drawings of the actual circuitry was about 9 months ago. I suspect that the machine itself was further along at that point than the CAD drawings. I think they probably did have prototype circuits up and running. A few weeks back they teased us with the pre-production unit. So this was a unit that looked to be functional. They have stated at the same time that the user interface, as far as they're concerned, is done. So that interface looks like it's probably going to be the final interface unless they find something glaringly obvious during testing. They've also stated that the drum tones will be sampled between 8 and 12 bits, and that's very faithful with the way the original LMDrum worked, and actually, funny enough, the way the original the LM1 worked as well. So very faithful to both those machines. We know the unit has a graphical interface on it, which is something that wasn't on the original LMDrum. And to change the sound sets on the original LMDrum, what you did was you basically cracked the case open, and inside there you would see a whole raft of EPROM holders, and you could take the EPROMs out and put new EPROMs in to the machine, and that's how you change the sound of the machine, and how it became known as the sampling drum machine, which is kind of a bit of misleading because you couldn't sample on the drum machine. You had to sample on something else and then burn the sound in the format to the EPROM. So, and if you looked at people who owned the LMDrum and I think the Compute and the LM1, they had a range of EPROMs with different sounds on them that they could just drop into the machine. And that's how you did it. That's how you got your custom sounds back in the day. Now, if you want to see an example of this, look out for the Behringer YouTube video they did on the LMDrum used by Tears for Fears. And probably, I think it's towards the end of that video, they open up a case full of EPROMs. And these would have been the chips that Tears for Fears would have dropped into the LMDrum to make those classic sounds from Songs from the Big Chair. Okay, that's what this drum machine was used for, was songs for the big chair, especially Shout and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I think both of those were done on this particular machine. So, and the other thing that was really interesting about this is that that LMDrum machine that they took to pieces and were showcasing, which was owned by Tears for Fears, that video was shot, well, I don't know what it was shot by, but it was definitely featured on the Behringer channel. So they were already thinking about this some time ago. They went and bought one of the original machines. So, and it happened to be owned by Tears for Fears, of course. But were they telling us something all that time ago? Now, I suspect the modern interpretation of this particular machine is not going to have you cracking the case and putting EPROMs in it. It will allow you, I suspect, to sample different drum kits into the machine and assign them to the pads. That's kind of how I think that's going to work, bringing the concept completely up to date how we would do things now. But this is interesting because this then puts this new drum machine into the competition range of the Roland Groove boxes and the new SP1200 upstart, the S2400 upstart from Euler Instruments, which is something I've actually got in the studio and I've been playing with a lot over the last few months. But it does seem to be encroaching into that territory. Maybe because they're going to limit the sampling to 8 and 12 bits, that may change it in terms of how it works, because obviously the newer machine, the S2400, can both at low res, sample at low res and high res. It also looks like, but not confirmed, the wave designer and the analog filtering that was included in the RD9, which again wasn't present on the 909, is going to be present on this machine. And I would turn around and say, why wouldn't you put these two features on this new machine, given that you've developed all the circuitry for it, for the 909 reimagination? Why wouldn't you, port these features between the machines that you're running? So that's really, if you go and look at the internet, and I've scoured the internet, I've spent quite a few hours scouring the internet. Well, it's more than a few hours scouring the internet looking for snippets of information. There are lots of YouTube channels like mine out there that are putting out snippets of information about the LMDrum. What I've tried to do with this video is bring all that information together into what do we currently know about this machine. And the bottom point is not a lot. They're really keeping this close to the chest at the moment. So there's probably some people out there that know more than this, but they're not allowed to commit. So I'm going to finish this video by saying, Behringer, if you want to be the tester, then I'm sure I could be made available to help you out. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with my normal greeting, which is live long and prosper. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.